I watched a billionaire drop a wallet stuffed with $100,000 right in front of a homeless girl who hadn't eaten in 3 days. What happened next wasn't just unexpected, it shattered everything that man believed about people, about poverty, and about the human heart. Before we dive into this incredible story, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because stories like this remind us why faith in humanity matters. Trust me, you'll want to share this one. It was a bitter, cold morning in Detroit, the kind of cold that cuts through whatever layers you're wearing and settles deep in your bones. I'm talking about that February freeze where the wind doesn't just blow, it attacks. Most people were rushing past the storefronts downtown, heads down, hands shoved in pockets, trying to get wherever they needed to go as fast as possible. Nobody was stopping. Nobody was looking around. And absolutely nobody was paying attention to the young woman sitting against the brick wall of a closed clothing store. Her name was Aaliyah Thompson, and she was 19 years old. She sat on a flattened cardboard box with a thin blanket wrapped around her shoulders, her breath coming out in small white clouds. Next to her was a backpack that held everything she owned in this world, which wasn't much. A change of clothes, a photograph of her grandmother, a water bottle, and a small notebook where she used to write down her dreams back when dreaming still felt possible. Aaliyah had been homeless for 67 days, not because she was lazy or because she'd made terrible choices. She'd aged out of the foster care system the year before, one of thousands of kids who turn 18 and suddenly find themselves completely alone. No family safety net. No one to call when things go wrong. She'd been working at a diner, barely making enough to cover a room she rented, but when the diner closed down 3 months ago, everything fell apart fast. Too fast. One missed rent payment became 2, then an eviction notice, and then she was out on the street with that backpack and a cardboard sign that read, "Anything helps. God bless." She hadn't eaten in 3 days. Her stomach had moved past growling into this hollow, nauseating emptiness. But what struck me most about Aaliyah wasn't the obvious poverty or the dirt on her clothes. It was her eyes. Despite everything, there was still something unbroken in them. Still some small flame of dignity that refused to go out. Now, about a block away, sitting in the back of a black luxury sedan with heated leather seats, was Theodore Monroe. Mr. Monroe was 62 years old and worth approximately $3 billion. He'd built his fortune in real estate development, buying up properties in major cities and transforming them into high-end apartments and commercial spaces. He was the kind of man who wore suits that cost more than most people's monthly rent and who hadn't pumped his own gas in probably 30 years. But here's what you need to understand about Theodore Monroe. 3 months earlier, his wife of 38 years had passed away after a long battle with cancer. And in those final days, as he sat by her hospital bed holding her hand, she'd said something that haunted him. She'd looked at him with those tired eyes and whispered, "Theodore, you've spent your whole life building things. Buildings, wealth, a name. But have you ever really seen people? Have you ever looked past what they can do for you and just seen them?" Those words had been eating at him ever since. He couldn't shake them. And somewhere in his grief and his guilt and his loneliness, Theodore had convinced himself that his late wife had been naive, that her years of charity work and kindness had blinded her to a simple truth he believed in, that everyone had a price, that given the right circumstances, anyone would choose money over morality. So he'd come up with a test, a cruel test maybe, but one he felt compelled to conduct. He'd had his assistant withdraw $100,000 in cash, all $100 bills, and stuff them into a brand new leather wallet. The plan was simple. He'd drop this wallet near someone who was desperate, someone who truly needed money, and he'd watch what they did. Would they keep it? Would they try to find the owner? He told himself he was conducting a social experiment, but really, he was trying to prove his late wife wrong. He was trying to justify the walls he'd built around his heart. His driver, Jerome, a man who'd worked for the Monroe family for 15 years, sat quietly in the front seat. Jerome had watched his boss change over the past 3 months, watched him become harder and more cynical, and it worried him. But he kept his thoughts to himself as Mr. Monroe spotted Aaliyah sitting against that wall. "There," Mr. Monroe said, pointing. "That young woman. Pull over here." Jerome did as he was told, parking the sedan about 30 feet from where Aaliyah sat. Mr. Monroe clutched the wallet in his hand, feeling the weight of all that cash. His heart was pounding, though he wouldn't admit it. He stepped out of the car, the cold air hitting him immediately, and walked past Aaliyah as if he didn't see her. Then, with practiced casualness, he let the wallet slip from his hand. It hit the sidewalk with a soft thud, landing just a few feet from where she sat. Mr. Monroe kept walking for a few more steps, then turned and headed back to his car, his eyes never directly looking at Aaliyah, but watching her in his peripheral vision. He got back in the sedan and told Jerome to keep the engine running. Aaliyah had seen the wallet fall. At first, she thought maybe she was imagining it, that her hungry, tired mind was playing tricks on her. But no, there it was. A brown leather wallet just lying there on the concrete. She looked around, trying to see who might have dropped it, and caught a glimpse of the well-dressed man getting back into the expensive car. Her hands were shaking as she reached for the wallet, not from the cold this time, but from something else. Hope, maybe. Or fear. Or both. She picked it up, and the weight of it surprised her. This wasn't empty. She glanced around again, making sure no one was watching, then opened it. I need you to understand what happened in Aaliyah's mind at that moment. She saw the money, stack after stack of $100 bills. More money than she'd ever seen in her entire life. More money than she'd earned in a year at the diner. Her brain started calculating automatically. This could be food. Real food, not just whatever she could find. This could be a hotel room with a hot shower and a real bed. This could be a new start. A security deposit on an apartment. Work clothes for job interviews. A bus ticket to somewhere warmer. Tears started rolling down her cheeks. She was shaking so hard now that she almost dropped the wallet. 3 days without food, 67 days on the streets, 19 years of life that had been nothing but hard, and here in her hands was a way out. Just take it and walk away. The man in the fancy car probably wouldn't even miss it. Rich people lose things all the time, right? But then she heard her grandmother's voice in her head. Her grandmother, who'd taken care of her until Aaliyah was 12, before she passed and Aaliyah entered the foster system. Her grandmother, who used to say, "Baby girl, being poor don't mean being low. You keep your head up and your conscience clean, you hear me? What you are on the inside, that's what matters. That's what you take with you." Aaliyah closed the wallet. She stood up on legs that felt weak and unsteady. She wrapped that thin blanket tighter around her shoulders and started walking toward the black sedan. Inside the car, Mr. Monroe watched her stand up with the wallet, and he felt this sick sense of vindication already forming. See? Even someone who looked as desperate as that girl was going to keep it. Everyone had a... But then she started walking toward him, not away, toward him. Mr. Monroe's breath caught in his throat. Jerome turned in his seat, watching too. Aaliyah reached the car and knocked gently on the back window. Her knuckles were red and raw from the cold. Mr. Monroe hesitated for just a moment, then rolled down the window. Their eyes met, and something passed between them in that instant. Something neither of them was prepared for. "Excuse me, sir?" Aaliyah's voice was soft but clear. "I think you dropped this." She held out the wallet with both hands, offering it back to him. Mr. Monroe just stared at her. His mouth opened, but no words came out. He reached for the wallet slowly, as if it might disappear if he moved too fast, and took it from her hands. The wallet that still held $100,000. The wallet she could have taken. The wallet that could have changed her life. You... Mr. Monroe stammered. Theodore Monroe, who'd negotiated billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, couldn't form a complete sentence. Aaliyah gave him a small, tired smile. "Have a blessed day, sir," she said, and started to turn away. "Wait!" The word burst from Mr. Monroe's mouth. "Please, wait. When did you last eat?" Aaliyah stopped. She turned back to him, and now he could see how thin she was, how exhausted. "That's kind of you to ask, but I'll be all right." "That's not what I asked you." Mr. Monroe's voice was gentler now. "When did you last eat a real meal?" Aaliyah's eyes dropped to the ground. "Thursday," she whispered. It was Sunday. Something cracked inside Theodore Monroe's chest. Some wall that had been building for months, maybe years, maybe his whole life, just crumbled. His eyes filled with tears, which shocked him because Theodore Monroe didn't cry. He hadn't cried at his own wife's funeral. "Jerome," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Open the door." Jerome quickly got out and opened the rear passenger door. Mr. Monroe slid over to make room. "Please," he said to Aaliyah. "Please get in. Let me buy you breakfast at the very least." Aaliyah hesitated. She'd been taught to be careful, especially as a young woman alone. But something about this man's face, about the genuine tears in his eyes, made her trust him. She got in the car. The warmth inside the sedan was overwhelming. Aaliyah started shaking again, but this time from the sudden temperature change. Mr. Monroe took off his cashmere overcoat and draped it over her shoulders without asking. "Jerome, take us to Baldwin's." It was an upscale diner about 10 minutes away. They rode in silence at first. Mr. Monroe kept looking at Aaliyah, really looking at her in a way he realized he hadn't looked at another person in a very long time. Finally, he spoke. "Why did you give it back?" Aaliyah turned to face him. "Because it wasn't mine, sir. That's not how my grandmother raised me." "But you're clearly struggling. You haven't eaten in 3 days. That money could have helped me, yes, sir," Aaliyah interrupted quietly. "But it would have cost me something more important than comfort. It would have cost me who I am." Mr. Monroe felt tears rolling down his cheeks now. He didn't try to hide them or wipe them away. "What's your name?" he asked. "Aaliyah. Aaliyah Thompson." "Theodore Monroe." He extended his hand and they shook. "Aaliyah, I need to be honest with you about something." And right there, in the back of that car, Theodore Monroe told her the truth. He told her about his late wife's words, about his test, about the $100,000 he'd deliberately dropped to see what she would do, about his cynicism and his brokenness and his need to prove that nobody was genuinely good anymore. Aaliyah listened quietly. When he finished, she was silent for a long moment. Then she said something that absolutely destroyed him. "Mr. Monroe, I'm not sad that you tested me. I'm sad that you felt you needed to. What kind of world have you been living in where you forgot that good people still exist?" He had no answer for that. At the restaurant, heads turned when they walked in. A billionaire in a $3,000 suit and a homeless teenager. The hostess's smile faltered, but Mr. Monroe's glare silenced any objection. They sat in a booth by the window, and Mr. Monroe told Aaliyah to order anything she wanted. She ordered pancakes, eggs, bacon, orange juice, and toast. When the food came, she ate slowly, savoring every bite, and Mr. Monroe watched her with a mixture of shame and awe. They talked for 2 hours. She told him about foster care, about her dreams of maybe going to college someday to study social work so she could help other kids like her, about how she wanted to make sure no child ever felt invisible the way she had felt. He told her about his wife, about how he'd been so focused on building his empire that he'd missed so many small moments with her, about how wealth had isolated him, surrounded him with people who wanted something from him, until he'd forgotten how to simply connect with another human being. "Your wife was right, you know," Aaliyah said softly. "You can't see people when you're looking down at them or when you're looking at what they can do for you. You have to look across at them. As equals." Theodore Monroe broke down completely then. He put his face in his hands and sobbed in that restaurant booth, while this homeless teenager who had every reason to be bitter and angry sat across from him with compassion in her eyes. When he composed himself, he made her an offer. Not charity. He knew somehow that she wouldn't accept charity. An opportunity. A job at his property management company. A real position with real responsibilities and a real salary. And an apartment in one of his buildings, which she'd pay for from her salary at a reduced rate. Aaliyah's first instinct was to refuse. It felt like too much. But Mr. Monroe explained that he needed someone with her perspective, her integrity, her understanding of what it meant to struggle. I've been making decisions about housing, about rent prices, about people's lives, from the back seat of that car for decades. I need someone who knows what it's really like. I need you to help me see people again. She accepted, not because she needed saving, but because she recognized that maybe he did. 6 months later, Aaliyah was thriving. She wasn't just working at Monroe Property Group, she was transforming it. She'd proposed an affordable housing initiative specifically for young people aging out of foster care, and Mr. Monroe had funded it immediately. Within the first year, they'd helped 50 young people find stable housing and employment. Mr. Monroe had changed too. He'd started actually visiting his properties, talking to tenants, understanding their struggles. He'd established a foundation in his late wife's name, dedicated to supporting foster youth, and he'd named Aaliyah as the director. They met for breakfast every Sunday at Baldwin's, and he'd often say, "You gave me back my humanity, Aaliyah." And she'd always reply the same way. "It was always there, Mr. Monroe. You just needed to remember it." That wallet, the one with the $100,000, now sits in a frame in the foundation's office. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder that character isn't measured by what we do when people are watching, but by who we are when we think nobody sees. A reminder that real wealth has nothing to do with bank accounts, and everything to do with integrity. And a reminder that sometimes the people we think need saving are actually the ones who save us. What started as a cynical test became a life-changing moment for both of them. Aaliyah didn't just return a wallet that day, she returned a broken man's faith in humanity. And Mr. Monroe didn't just help one homeless girl, he learned that real wealth is measured in integrity, not dollars. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe to this channel for more stories that celebrate the human spirit. And remember, your character is tested most when no one's watching. How will you choose? Drop a comment below and tell me what you would have done in Aaliyah's situation. Let's talk about it because these conversations matter. Until next time, keep choosing kindness, keep choosing integrity, and keep believing in the goodness that still exists in this world. Because I promise you it's out there, sometimes in the most unexpected places.